Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. Before we jump in, I want to share some feedback from educators using the Why We Play letters to communicate the importance of play in early childhood education and in whole child development. A director named Linda said, "I ordered your Why We Play series school license and just started opening them today. After opening the first set, I had to stop again and say thank you. We will be emailing one a week to parents and using them for teacher in-service as well. It is refreshing to have your clear, research-based voice in the chaos of opinions on what young children really need." Another email comes from Candy, who speaks for many teachers when she says, "I definitely wanted to have something at hand with research, but I just get so tongue-tied and frustrated with administration and parents in doing play-based instruction." She picked up the Why We Play letters, which were designed particularly with teachers like her in mind. Teachers who want to quickly and succinctly communicate the research and the theories that back up the critical need for play in the classroom and in the lives of young children. Remember, people don't value what they don't understand. We can help parents and administrators understand the power of play by starting important conversations with the Why We Play letters. Learn more and grab a free sample letter at notjustcute.com/whyweplay. If you are looking for a boost today, for a calm voice of reason in this historically challenging school year, you are in the right place. I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Dr. Nefertiti Poyner. Dr. Poyner works with the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children, and I'm going to tell you right now, she is an absolute delight. Education is always a challenge, but that challenge has grown exponentially this year. Educators and parents and the children that they love and teach are being stretched in every direction right now. In this episode, Dr. Poyner shares some of the principles for building resilience and creating what she calls ordinary magic that helps us all to bounce back. She'll share a fantastic script to help us build resilience and healthy relationships in the middle of all the frustration that children are feeling as they navigate these new restrictions in the classroom. And she also helps us to remember how to simply live today well. I could listen to her talk all day long. I hope that you enjoy her message as much as I did. You can find show notes for this episode at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 36. We could all use a healthy dose of Dr. Poyner's positivity, so let's jump in. Dr. Nefertiti Poyner, thank you so much for making time to talk with me this morning.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
I've been so excited to talk to you about all the work that you do and a lot of the things that you share online, and I'm so excited to make sure that other people are aware of these resources that you share and offer and the perspectives that you have that I think are just so valuable. But before I get into all of that, I love to start out by getting a little bit of background from guests on their professional journey and how they've arrived at where they are and the work that they do. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think I was one of those little girls when you asked me what I wanted to be when I became a grown up. I would always say I wanted to be a teacher. I think I had so many different adults in my life who helped shape who I think I've become today, and a lot of that has to do with my educators. So I always wanted to be a teacher. So I got all of my undergraduate work, my graduate work, my doctoral work. It's all teaching. But when I got into the classroom, it did not align with what I learned in my textbooks. And because I could talk to your audience forever, I will just say to them that I've always wanted to be a good teacher. But what I found when I was in pre-kindergarten as well as kindergarten is that the ABC teaching that we always tend to make the priority, it had to become secondary for me. Mm-hmm. And I say this because what I learned through teaching my little ones is that you had to make sure that they were smiling. You had to make sure that they had a level of confidence. You had to make sure that they felt a sense of, I can do this. And sometimes I had to do that before we opened a book or we did any circle time. I call it teaching to their spirit. And I don't want your listeners to think that I mean anything outside of just beyond the hitting and the fighting and the biting that we sometimes see with our little ones. They have a spirit. And if teachers and as parents as well, if we remember that that's where the learning happens, then I think it will be great. So fast forward about 7 years, I'm teaching kindergarten, and I am growing a little bit frustrated because I'm having a hard time finding my way with the politics of education. Right. So again, I'm not going to go too much into that, but I'm in the
It sounds like we have many episodes we should do.
Oh, yes. I'm in the classroom. I'm doing my best, but outside of the classroom doors, at the professional development meetings, at the meetings with different leaders, I am growing a bit frustrated. And so I say to myself, okay, Nefertiti, what are you going to do? And so at that time, I'm introduced to some work that's being done by an organization, which is right in Philadelphia, where I live. And it's the best day of my life, Amanda, because I learn about work that so resonates with me. And I said, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known about this before because I'd be a better teacher, because it's all about social emotional health. Mm-hmm. It is all about social emotional health. And so through my work with the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children, we prioritize the teaching of social emotional health and resilience. And so for the past 20 years, I get such a pleasure to be able to say I am living out my occupation. Where I no longer have an occupation, I have an occupation. But I don't think this work, I could even say that if I didn't start out in the classroom. Mm-hmm. I think I better can say this is my passion, because getting here was not easy. But I like to tell teachers all the time, we can do this. We can do this. And I call him Kevin. You know, that's a coin name I call that child, you know, the one that's never absent, never is absent, first one to get there, last one to go home. I just affectionately call him Kevin. And through my work, all teachers have a Kevin. And in a side joke, I tell them that they grow up. Kevins grow up. Right, and some of us marry those guys. That too is another webinar. Excuse me.
Oh, you just gave me goosebumps, all of that. I love your perspective, and where you've come from and what you're doing is so important. And you mentioned the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children. Do they just work locally? Are there resources and things people can access and be using beyond Philadelphia? Can you tell us a little bit more about what they do?
Absolutely. So when I said I was most familiar with it, I know that my mom is a social worker by trade, and I watched her social work all her life. And I knew the Devereaux Foundation because our parent organization is one of the largest behavioral health organizations. So we provide clinical level support to children and families who have severe cognitive difficulties, and we have at-home programming, we have community-based programming, and some of our individuals actually live within our Devereaux schools and programs. But inside of the Devereaux Advanced Behavioral Health Organization sits the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children, and that's who I work for. We're a small team. We are based in Philadelphia. Well, it's actually called Villanova, which is a little city outside of Philly. But most of us work remotely. So even before COVID, most of us were remote. But we are national. We have a national presence. We do training and technical assistance. We have assessments. And you heard me just use the word webinar by mistake a moment ago, because now we are knee deep into webinar world as we try to help programs figure out how to prioritize social emotional health and resilience.
And it's so important, and it has always been so important, but even more so now. So you use the word resilient a lot, and I feel like we use it a lot in early childhood education and child development. We talk a lot about resilience, and it's one of those words that I wonder if we all understand what it means, or if we all are using the same definition for what it means. So since this is really your area of expertise, can you tell us a little bit about resilience, how you would define it, and what it really looks like, what it really means for us, and why it's important for us as early childhood professionals to understand it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the most important thing for our listeners to understand is that it's a trait. It is a set of skills. And I always like to remind people they're observable, they're measurable, and they're teachable. And so when we think about resilience for our youngest children, it is their ability to struggle a little bit, but know how to bounce back from that struggle. I think we've all read the story to our children. Many of your listeners might be familiar with Pete the Cat, who says it's all good. So when we're thinking about resilience for little ones, it's allowing them to understand that life is going to stretch you a little bit. Sometimes in live trainings, I will use a rubber band as a visual, and I will explain to the audience that resilience is being pulled a little bit, but then having the capacity to bounce back. But the challenge for me, Amanda, sometimes is that some of the children that we know or we work with, the way that their rubber band has been stretched in the few years that they've had to live in this world is just very hurtful to me. Mm-hmm. I remember being a classroom teacher and listening to what my children would say, just acting it out in dramatic play or in housekeeping. And I would say to myself, why do you know that? Mm-hmm. Why do you know that? And so I think when I say resilience, I'm thinking about those children who, because they have nothing to do with it, the way that their rubber band has been stretched and they're having to bounce back. But I also want team members to know that for children who seemingly have everything that they need or want, they also will be faced with circumstances in life that they're going to have to use their resilience. And I think this COVID-19 pandemic that we're living with at the time of this recording is a primary example of being stretched, but then the adults around you helping you learn the skills that you need to bounce back.
So important. And I know I hear from a lot of teachers and a lot of parents, just as you mentioned, in this COVID-19 pandemic. There's so much to be concerned about, but one of the things that a lot of people are carrying is this concern for children. What is this going to do to our children, and what's going to be the outcome, not just the illness, but even more so the social aspects and the, like you said, the stretching that it's requiring. And it's such a great reminder that it is unique in what it really is, the unique circumstances, but that it's a part of life that we will be stretched, and that there are those same factors hold true that create resilience, and that our children are resilient, and that we can be aware of that, not just worry about it, but be aware of what we can do to strengthen them and help them, not just through this, but through life, that it will apply equally. So what are some of those protective factors? I love that phrase from the work in resilience, because I think it is easy for us as parents and as professionals to really focus on those negative things that bring us concern, that hurt our hearts, that we worry about our children. But there's that flip side in the resilience research that focuses on protective factors. So can you explain a little bit about what that concept is and what some of those protective factors are?
Absolutely. Again, I like to use visuals whenever I'm with a group. And so if our listeners could imagine a rubber band being stretched, but let's also invite them to think about this with us as well. Imagine that the risks that we all face, both children, families, communities, that's like the rain. That it's like standing in the rain. And COVID-19 is, again, an example of what often feels like a torrential downpour.
Right.
But I think this is the good side, and I'm so glad that we can talk about this as well. Imagine standing in the rain, but you've got your umbrella up. Your umbrella is your protective factor. It does not make what is raining on you stop, but it does give you a buffer. And one of the reasons why I say this work is my occupation is because I get to tell somebody what I learned a long time ago. Ann Maston, Masten. She's one of the seminal researchers in the body of resilience, and she says that resilience can be thought of as ordinary magic. And I love that, because when you feel like it's raining on you, it's really hard to think at all. But Ann Maston says that ordinary magic we can think about resilience that way. So let's talk about that. One of the best protective factors is a warm hug, or a caring heart, or a warm smile. And I think that even if, as your listeners listen to this recording now, you are enough. And you can do this. And I know that it feels hard on some days, but we do see very well documented in the resilience research is a caring adult.
Mm-hmm.
It is a caring adult. And then there are some skills that our children have, sense of humor. This is I wish I could have a do-over in life, because Kevin, Amanda, he was so funny. But because his humor was also coupled with sometimes aggressive behavior. And at one point in my career, my parents were asking their children to be removed from my classroom because they did not think I was keeping the other children safe. And that was so hurtful to me. Mm-hmm. He was funny. And I could have done a better job of highlighting his humor in a more conducive way to classroom, but he was funny. And the research says a sense of humor. But we also hear we see in the research, we call it at Devereaux a sense of initiative. You ever had that child that's just got that sense of go-get-itness? They're risk takers, and we're like, oh no, don't do that.
Right.
But the resilience research says a sense of initiative can be a protective factor. And I could go on, but you better stop me.
No, I'm loving it. I'm just eating it all up. And I love that phrase that you used from Anne Maston, the ordinary magic. And I think it's such a great reminder that so much of what we do, like you said, that it is enough, that these ordinary things work magic, just really things we take for granted that build those relationships, that build up those, help patch up those umbrellas. It really is ordinary magic. I love that phrase. I'm so glad that you used it.
Yeah.
So there are those protective factors for our children, the children that we work with. But there's also, I think, something we need to consider for us as adults, especially right now where we are also feeling that same stress and anxiety and worry. So are the protective factors for the adults similar? Are they the same? Are there some different ones to keep in mind for, especially for educators right now, that we can be doing to build our own resilience?
That's such a good question. So when the Devereaux Center for Resilient Children started, we actually started with assessments for preschool age children. But when we would be in front of audiences that service babies and toddlers, they would ask us, well, what about babies? Can we promote their resilience? And we said, we started to look at the research, and we certainly can promote the protective factors of babies. But it was during the creation of our resources for infants and toddlers that we all said to each other, we must include something for the adult here, because so much of the baby's development is contingent upon that of a healthy grown-up. Mm-hmm. And so that is when we started looking at the research to what does it take to bounce back when life has been hard for you? How do you do that? And again, we saw the resilience research invite us to think about protective factors. And the good news is so many of the same protective factors that children need, we need as grown-ups. We just talked about initiative for a moment. Imagine that 4-year-old who's feisty and always into everything. When he or she grows up, that might be one of the ways that they navigate trying to find a job and trying to deal with the layoff, or even if we want to be transparent here, just dealing with the personal parts of who we are, mm-hmm. bouncing back from a difficult relationship or marriage. Your protective factors matter. And so in our work, we measure initiative as a protective factor. We measure self-regulation as a protective factor, and we measure attachment and relationships as a protective factor. We do the same thing with adults, the same 3 protective factors. We did see one additional protective factor emerge in the research, and we call that one internal beliefs. Now, I think this one, every time I talk about it out loud, I start to tell people, I so suffered with my internal beliefs as a young person. And then when I got in the classroom and I thought I was well educated, I thought I was prepared, I had the heart to be a good teacher, but my days were so difficult for me. It really started to impact my internal beliefs. I started to feel, Nefertiti, maybe you wanted to be a teacher, but you're not cut out for this. But through just continued education and mentoring, I realized I wasn't alone. And here, several years later, Kevins are one of the main reasons why teachers leave the field, mm-hmm. because we just don't always know what to do. So I say internal beliefs is that protective factor that you have to like the person that you see in the mirror. Mm-hmm. You have to love him or her. So the good news is so many of the protective factors that children need, we need them too as grown-ups.
Right. To recognize, like you said, to turn that, look in the mirror and see, am I doing the same things for myself? Am I building? I think one of a really pointed question sometimes, especially for so many educators who give and give and build and then realize, do you talk to yourself the way that you talk to these children as you build them up and you speak so compassionately? Do you offer yourself the same compassion in the way that you think about yourself and speak to yourself in your inner monologue? It's an important reminder. Well, you share, I love your videos, and I'll make sure that I link in the show notes, both to the Devereaux Center and to so many of these videos that you share. I just love them. They're quick and succinct, but so powerful, and you have such a magnificent way of speaking. And you shared one video that I saw recently that you shared with your adorable daughter. Oh my goodness, so cute. And you were talking through some of the frustration and the disappointment that comes along with the rules and the guidelines that have been given, and the frustration that we are all feeling, but that our young little ones are really dealing with some really big frustrations that can sometimes be easy for us to dismiss or overlook how large they loom for them. You know, big things like missed birthday parties and changed plans. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of teachers right now who are dealing with that same concept right now, where they have rooms full of children who are adapting to a whole new set of rules and procedures and those frustrations. So do you have, I'll share that, I'll definitely link to that video, but do you have some specific tips for teachers who are trying to build resilience and relationships in those types of situations?
Yeah, the video that you are referring to, at the way that we do things in my family, we do celebrate every birthday, but not every birthday is as extravagant as your 5-year-old birthday, because 5-year-olds, we couldn't wait to be a 5-year-old, because that meant we were going to go to kindergarten and we were learning to ride our bike without our training wheels. And just a few days before we had checked on the venue and they said, yes, everything is ready to go, we were in line to get a birthday cake. And we got a phone call that said that the venue had been closed and Madison could not have her 5-year-old birthday party. So we have to talk about that. And I think what COVID-19 has taught me, which I already know, but sometimes you just need that reminder. Right. And I would like to ask your listeners to think about this with me. Remember that children, just like us, we have feelings. And sometimes we're so quick to respond to the children's behavior. But I want us all to remember to acknowledge the feeling. And so children can be disappointed. Children can be frustrated. Children can be anxious. Children can be confused. And sometimes, because they're still learning how to display that feeling, it will look like misbehavior. Mm-hmm. So you might see lots of tears. You might see tantrums. But also to remember that all behavior is meaningful. All behavior is feeling. Mm-hmm. Everything that our children do with their behavior, be it good or not so good, is demonstrating a feeling for them. So I would like to I also like to do things concretely. Let's always start with, I see you are. And that's when you just mirror back the behavior that you see. And then you say to them, I wonder if you're feeling. So for example, if they are wanting to go outside, but today is a rainy day. And we can say, I see your face. Your mouth is turned down. You look a little bit sad. Are you disappointed that we are not going outside today? And then just hold it for a little bit. Just hold the feeling, and then remind them that this is not going to be always. I think, again, it's a parallel process. A lot of the stuff we say to our children, we need to say to ourselves. Mm-hmm. This COVID-19 experience has felt as if it's been, I heard a commentator say on the news, it's been 6 months. I looked at the clock. I said, it feels like it's been 6 years.
Right.
but to hold it and to remind the children that it's not going to be forever. And that what can we do instead? Whenever I have to tell my children one no, I like to couple it with at least 3 yeses. So, for example, if we can't go outside today because it is raining, we can do this, we can do this, or we can do this. See, the other thing about being a good teacher and a good parent is you got to make the children feel like they're in control. So mm-hmm. You say, we can't do this today, but we can do these other 3 things. And you try to give them choices. Of course, choices that are very, very, that we can pick from, but just helping them also feel that, because right now, many children are just finding their way. They're like, where's my school? Why do you have that mask on? What are we doing at this laptop? It's just, so you want to help them feel as if they have a place. Where are you? Ask them their opinion, invite them to plan with you. But I also think it goes back to something you said early when we started the recording. We have to take good care of ourselves, because all of this can be very exhausting. I have teacher tired coupled with parent fatigue. Sometimes I don't know if I am coming or I am going.
Right?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I love that. And it's so interesting. Well, I love the words that you give us. It's so helpful, I think, to have those starting scripts to get us started. And when you talk about giving them those choices, here's what we can do. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and giving them some choice and some control and some power. I think it really speaks back to what you talked about with having initiative as a resilience factor. And it really speaks to me. I'm a little bit of a recovering control freak. And so these kinds of situations where suddenly everything is different, everything changes, and you must do this and you can't do that. Those of us, which I think there's a little bit in everyone, that really feel that need for control, that's where a lot of that panic and frustration comes from, is suddenly we don't feel like we have any control. And I imagine these young children, the same thing, suddenly feeling like there's zero control. And so if we can flip that, just like you suggest, and say, I see you are this, I wonder if you're feeling this, and then saying that, holding that space, that is frustrating that we can't do it the way we used to, but what can we do instead, and giving some of that power and control back to them that they feel is just so missing right now for them. So that's such a great reminder. Thank you so much for such a valuable tool to be able to use. I feel like I could talk to you all day long. I just love everything that you're sharing, and I really feel like I would love to do this again. There's so many topics that you share that I would love to talk with you about. And one of the things I've mentioned before that I love about these videos that you share is you have such a calming and encouraging and positive presence when you speak. And I think that's something we could all so use right now. And I feel like we've gotten so much of it from what you've already shared. But I wondered, as we wrap up, if you could just share any parting words of encouragement for early childhood teachers and directors and all of us working in this early childhood space that need so much encouraging right now. If you have any parting pep talk for us. Yeah,
I said this earlier, and I mean this, and I try. As of late, people have been saying to me, "Well, Nefertiti, let's talk about this, and let's talk about this." And I've been needing to do a lot of my own self-talk, and one of the things that I want your listeners to remember is that you are enough. I know that this is hard and it feels like it's never ending, but you are enough. And my encouragement to you is to live today well. Do your best to stay in today. Sometimes we get so concerned about the next few days or the next few years. Don't do that. Because guess what? Things are changing so much every day. You can't even imagine what tomorrow is going to look like. And so my encouragement, until maybe I do have a chance to talk to your listeners again, is to live today well. Live today well. And then tomorrow when you get up, you live that day well. But let's take this thing one day at a time, and to remember to live today well.
Oh, well, I just feel like I've been so well fed by everything that you shared today. Thank you so much for lifting all of us, encouraging all of us, and giving us some real tools to use and to go forward and to live today well. I really appreciate that. Now, I'm sure that people are going to be looking all over to try to find out how they can get more of what you're sharing. And like I said, I'll link your videos and the Devereaux Center. Are there any other places where they can find you and follow your work, best places for them to go?
Well, I think whatever you put in the show notes will probably be the best thing. I'm putting my big toe in social media. I do have a Facebook page that I will share with. I'll put my name, my listing there. But I think that's about all I have right now, because I'm a little bit afraid of social media. But I know I have to do better with this.
You
I
are
have
smart.
a Twitter account, but I don't know how to use it.
I fumble around in it all the time. I'm not doing any of it very well. And I think you're doing your selected things very, very well. So I think you're very smart to share the way that you're sharing. Well, thank you so much for making the time today and sharing so much valuable information with our listeners. And I do hope that we can chat again soon.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 36. There you'll find links to several of Dr. Poyner's videos along with other interesting tidbits addressed in this episode. Show notes will also share a link to the Why We Play letters so you can check those out and download a free sample letter. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. And follow me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/notjustcute. I'm also freshly and somewhat awkwardly on Instagram, so follow me there at Amanda_notjustcute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.